everybody. Welcome back to Coco and Daltz. We're real people bringing you real reviews of all the latest streaming movies and series on Netflix, DisneyPlus, and Amazon Prime. I'm not Daltz.
And I'm not Coco.
And for our next to last episode of 2020, this year can't end soon enough.
Man, oh man.
What are we reviewing today, Daltz?
So we're talking today, Coco, about Soul.
Do you have a soul?
Well, after this year, I'm wondering. I'm wondering what's left of my soul. Right. It's been broken down and beaten. So Joe is a middle-aged grade school teacher who teaches music class. And he falls in a manhole and dies. That's the summary of this Disney Pixar production.
That's the whole thing?
That's the whole thing. It's sort of like Inside Out versus or meets Coco, the animated production of the Afterlife. So there's a lot of Afterlife stuff here, and there's a lot of stuff about, you know, who deserves to live and who deserves not to live and all that sort of stuff. So it's essentially a redemption story about a man who tries to find more life and more meaning.
Oh, okay.
What do you think? Was that a good summary, or
Sure.
You're looking at me like, no, it wasn't a good summary?
The reason that Daltz is doing the summary today, listener, is because I was like, I don't really think that I could summarize this succinctly. So
it's a bit messy.
Yeah, Daltz is a lot better at summaries than I am.
I don't think that's true, especially in this case, because this is a hard one to summarize. So we're watching this movie with my daughters, and it's like, yeah, it's going to be about music and, you know, soul. Obviously, there's going to be some depth to it because it's a Pixar production. And then I wasn't really anticipating the turn that it took. And the next thing you know, there's a dead guy walking around trying to find his soul.
See, I knew about that part because I had read just kind of like an outline of like, oh, this is what the movie's about. So I knew that was coming. I didn't think that was going to come 10 minutes into the movie.
Right. You know? Especially the way it did, too.
Yeah, totally.
Like he gets this plum gig as being years and years as a failed jazz musician. He suddenly gets this plum gig, and he's going to be performing with a big star that evening, and then somehow dies, falls in a manhole cover. But I thought that was really interesting the way they did that, is that he goes around and avoids all these disasters and then falls in the manhole.
Yeah, he's so happy after he gets the gig with the big name jazz person that he's in New York. He's walking around on his cell phone. He's so happy. He's telling everybody that he got the gig. And then because he's not paying attention, he falls through a manhole cover and maybe perishes. Well,
the moral of the story is don't walk and talk on your phone during, when you're in the city.
Right.
Stay off your phone, people. All these Pixar movies have messages. This is that message.
Right.
It's don't be distracted by your phone.
Pay attention to the New York City traffic.
Right. So we should mention that Jamie Foxx is the voice of Joe, the middle-aged band teacher, and Tina Fey plays 22, who is so after Joe maybe dies, 22 is the soul who's trying to find a body on Earth, and the number is significant because apparently she was the 22nd soul created of all time. So, millennia ago. And she's been trying ever since to get into a body and just is not doing it. So part of this story is Joe convincing her that life is worth living and look at all the fun things you can get out of it. And she tries to help him get back so that he can be have this one more night of prime plum giggery with the fabulous jazz musician and live his life to its fullest. So, I generally like Pixar movies, Cars and Inside Out and Coco, like I said. They're all really top-notch animation. The animation in this was spectacular.
It was. There were definitely multiple scenes and part of it was because I wasn't wearing my glasses when I was watching it.
Oh, is that why you were sitting so close to the
TV? But there were a few scenes where I was like, is that animation or is that real?
Right.
Is that animated New York City or is that video of Manhattan?
Yeah, it was pretty spectacular. I mean, the animation is outstanding. And it's so hard for Pixar to top itself in terms of the animation, but it seems to every time they make something like this. Like, this was just great. This was supposed to be released in the summer, obviously. It was supposed to be a summer blockbuster for Pixar. And then they delayed it because of the pandemic, and, there were no theaters to show it in.
So now it's getting dumped on DisneyPlus.
So now it's an exclusive on DisneyPlus. And what they did this time, instead of doing what they did with Mulan, the live-action Mulan, when they charged a premium to people who are already a subscriber, which I thought was multiple cheeses on so many levels by Disney Plus. Here you are subscribing to a service like, oh yeah, by the way, you can get access to Mulan, but you have to pay $29.95. It's like, no, F you, Disney Plus.
I'll wait the 3 months for it just to be free for Disney Plus subscribers, and I'll watch it then, which we still haven't watched.
It's like that Seinfeld episode where the guy reserves a car at the car rental agency, and they go there and say, they don't have any cars. And they say, I don't think you understand the whole idea of a reservation. It's like, you don't understand the idea of subscribing to a service. It's like, I don't want to pay extra. I'm already subscribing. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I hope that Disney Plus has learned from that situation and that experience. And that's maybe why they decided not to charge for Soul. I don't know. Or maybe
we know that Disney Plus prices are going up next year anyways.
Right.
So maybe they figure, instead of $75 for a year, they'll charge $100 for a year. And because they have like 65 million subscribers in 1 year,
right,
that's a crap ton of cash.
Yep.
So that'll make up for all the money they've spent on Soul and Black Widow and all the other movies that they can't release in theaters, or they can, but they're not going to make their money back by far.
Exactly. I've been talking a lot about this one. So, Coco, what did you think? Because you're coming from a good perspective. You don't watch a lot of Pixar movies like I do. So
no, I have no idea what Inside Out is. I've heard of Cars and Coco, but I'm like, what the hell is Inside Out?
Yeah.
Is that like
It's their emotions. So it's an idea of the.
You don't have to explain it.
Okay.
So
Listener knows.
You said at the top that this was kind of a mess, and I agree with you. I think it should have been 2 different movies.
Right.
Like, I wish Joe could have gotten his years of struggle and finally making it big, like teaching kids to persevere and keep at it. I wish he could have had that story standing alone. Mm-hmm. And then I wish the story about 22 not thinking that living is worth it, but somebody showing her that it is, could have been a different movie. Like, I don't think those 2 needed to be mashed up.
Right. It was a hard mash.
Yeah, it really was. And I felt I thought it was kind of cheesy at the end. Like, so, spoiler alert, listener. At the end, Joe finally makes it back to his body and he gets the gig. And then the jazz performer says she wants to hire him like full time to be part of her backup band. Mm-hmm. So he's finally going to make it after years of struggle. And then he decides, this doesn't feel as good as I thought it would. I'm going to die again and let 22 have my spot here on Earth because she deserves it more than I did. And I'm like, what kind of BS is that? Like, are you kidding me? Like, that's even leaving out, like, I've read some criticism online about, so Joe is Black, and, it's great that this is, like, there's a Black protagonist. Most of the main characters are all Black, but 22 is a white woman. She's voiced by Tina Fey.
Oh, yeah.
And they even call it out in the movie, like, why do you sound like a middle-aged white woman?
Yeah.
So I've read a lot of criticism online about how, why does a Black guy have to die for a white woman to live?
Yeah,
and
I didn't even think of that, but that makes sense.
Yeah, and then there's the whole thing also about when they're in the afterlife, they don't look like themselves. They're just blobs. And it's like, well, why are Black people being robbed of like their bodies and just turned into blobs? Like,
and all other distinct ethnicities too.
Right, totally. So, yeah, so I thought it was just super cheesy, even leaving aside the fact that this is a Black man dying for a white woman, that he was just like, you know what, this doesn't feel as good as I thought it would, so I'm just going to die.
Right.
And
then talk about a waffle. Like, all the sacrifice and trouble they all went through to get there. And then he's like, yeah, I'm not feeling it.
Right. Like, for an hour.
Give it some more thought then, maybe, before we do all this.
Right. For an hour and a half, he's trying to get into his body so he can finally do the thing that his whole life he's wanted to do. And then he's just like,
Yeah.
Changed my mind. Yeah, so that was cheesy. I did think the voice actors did a great job. I love Jamie Foxx. He was wonderful. Felicia Rashad voiced his mother. I thought she did a good job. Angela Bassett and Daveed Diggs were also both in it. I thought they weren't used nearly enough as they should have been for their talents.
Especially Daveed Diggs, who a lot of people would know from Hamilton,
yeah.
the musical Hamilton. And he was fantastic in that.
And I wish so the music in the afterlife and on Earth were completely different. Like in the afterlife it was, and I appreciated that in the afterlife they completely neutered it of any and all religious symbolism. It was just very, very secular. But
very pastel.
Yeah. But in the afterlife the music was very like computerized. And then on Earth it was jazzy because Joe is a jazz musician. And I wish we could have had more of the jazz. Like I really wanted
the jazz was great.
Yeah, the jazz was wonderful. And also the Terry in the afterlife, the guy who's responsible for keeping track of the soul count, he was extremely annoying. So now I've talked a lot. And so now it's your turn.
Well, I agree with a lot of what you're saying, and I also I found it hard to follow some of it, which maybe that was just me being too simple. But I think the movie was overall well-intentioned, but it was just way too esoteric for the like. I think it's too hard for kids. Yeah. Some kids, not all kids, and I think it was too complex, like trying too hard to appeal to adults about life and all that sort of thing. I think there's a better movie in here. From what I read before our podcast and the extensive research notes that our research department provided to me.
Every episode they do that, listener.
Yeah, and sometimes I read them. And this particular one, apparently there were a lot of ideas around what the lead character should be. So not only the race of the character, but also the profession of the character. So they were talking about at one time the character was a scientist, but they couldn't really personalize that person to be likable enough, and then the person was going to be white, and then they did this and they did this, and it evolved. I think where they got to was good. I think like this Joe is a very interesting character. I like the jazz part of it because we don't see a lot of mainstream jazz productions like this, especially like in a Disney thing. And there were a lot of possibilities there, and I agree with you about the jazz music. The most touching parts of this movie are when Joe's sitting down at the piano and he's thinking back to his life, or thinking ahead to what he wanted to do and what he failed to do. That kind of stuff was really cool. Of note, so this is me being perhaps the biggest Nine Inch Nails fan in this house. The Afterlife music was produced and written and all that sort of stuff by Atticus Ross and Trent Reznor, who are part of Nine Inch Nails. This is a sign that the apocalypse is upon us, where Nine Inch Nails is doing a soundtrack for a Disney movie. Just want to put that out there. Oscar winning, by the way, those guys. But
they already won an undeserved Oscar for scoring The Social Network, which is like the most nothing burger original score ever. So
it's kind of really, it's like the epitome of background music. It's like, what, there was music in that movie?
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas in this, I thought it was really well done. I thought the Afterlife music was very well done. I disagree a little bit. I thought the jazz and I thought the paradox there and the two were really well done. But I agree with you that I really loved the jazz. Like this movie should have been more about music than it was. And
having soul right in the title. I understand that's a play on words. Right. Soul music.
It's a double entendre. But I think that if the jazz music had been more prevalent and they had been more of an experience in clubs and stuff like that, like I think there was real possibility. I don't know, and I'm watching the Afterlife stuff, and the characters there, for people who haven't seen it, are portrayed in a way that's like they're like Picasso-esque. They're very abstract, and you can't really tell if it's a person. And it was very creatively done.
Not angels, right? Not right. There's no pearly gates or anything,
and non-secular, like you said. And as I'm watching this, I'm thinking, man, I got to get in on one of these Pixar sessions because they are doing some serious drugs. Like whatever drugs they're doing in these idea-generating meetings are just fantastic, because this, these two-dimensional characters that look like Picasso characters, like I said.
Almost like Hammerman animation.
Wow.
We just watched an episode of Hammerman on YouTube, listener, and if you don't know what that is, look it up.
Listener, don't ask. So, this was too much of a mishmash for me because the abstracty, LSD induced afterlife characters were just way too distracting to me. I just really wanted to know more about Joe. I wanted to see Joe in his human form, not in his pastel blob form. I wanted to see his everyday life. So
Joe as a character deserved a full movie just devoted to him and not him trying to help somebody else realize it's a wonderful lifestyle, that life is worth living.
Right, which I just watched It's a Wonderful Life, so it's funny you mentioned that because it's the time of the year, even though that's not really a Christmas movie, but it gets sold as a Christmas movie. And there are a lot of similarities there in terms of, I'm just going to live my life, Mary. It's going to be great. Mary, Joe, everybody.
You're scaring the dog.
Yeah, sorry. But it's just, I don't know, I could go on and on. I enjoyed it. Whenever Pixar does a movie, it's worth paying attention to because they do such a good job, and it takes so long for them to do these movies. This movie started in 2016 as an idea and came to fruition in 2020. So it's
should have kept working on that idea, Pixar.
Yeah, and maybe in some ways, too much time can be your enemy too, right? Like you come up with maybe we should add this, and maybe we should add that, and maybe we should, smoke some drugs and create some Picasso guys, and they can be the angels or whatever they are. It just there was maybe too much time on their hands for this particular one. And some of in the early days of Pixar, they used to turn movies around in a couple of years. The animation and the story would work.
Didn't we just watch a thing that said Ghostbusters got turned around in like 10 months or something? So, and Ghostbusters is a classic. So,
right. It's not animated, so it's a little bit different.
A little bit different,
but there's a lot of CGI, or not CGI in those days, but a lot of special effects. The Stay Puft Marshmallow Man and stuff like that. So
love the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man.
I can't in good conscience recommend this one. I mean, it's fine. I noticed my youngest daughter was, her attention was waffling. I think my oldest daughter probably would have liked it better, but she came in late and missed it. But I think that for maybe, the tweens and early teens, this might be a decent flick, but I can't see it being appealing to anybody below that.
Yeah, you're right. Little kids, it's going to be way too abstract for them.
Yeah. Which I think is the beauty of some of the Pixar movies, is that they can be abstract, but also, like Cars is a very deep movie, but it's also entertaining to watch this talking car, it's engaging and you get it if you're a younger kid. But this is no Frozen, or this is no, blockbuster DisneyPlus movie. Pixar movie. I'd
give it like a C. Yeah. It definitely had some solid laughs talking about like crushing your soul, living is crushing your soul, and the music was fantastic. I really liked Joe as a character. I liked most of the supporting characters, but it was a mess.
Yeah, it's very messy. So that's it for this edition of the podcast, listener. Thank you for joining us. We are celebrating the holidays with more podcasts, so stay tuned. We might even watch something that doesn't have any sort of hallucinatory drug references in it.
Why would we want to do that?
So for another edition of the podcast, I'm not Coco.
And I'm not Dobbs.